They call him the Red-Headed Stranger, the outlaw who rewrote the rules of country music. Willie Nelson has spent 9 decades strumming his guitar, smoking his joints, and charming audiences with that weathered voice and that knowing smile. He's the man who never holds grudges, who sees the best in everyone, who preaches love and forgiveness from every stage he stands on. But that's only half the story, because behind that easy grin and those kind eyes, Willie Nelson has carried something else for all these years. A-list, not written down but etched deep in memory. 5 names that represent 5 wounds that never quite healed. Some were business partners who stabbed him in the back. Others were fellow legends who disrespected his craft. And one was someone he once trusted with everything. Now, at 92 years old, with more miles behind him than ahead, Willie's finally ready to tell the truth. And what he reveals will change how you see the greatest names in music history. Number 5, Ray Price. Long before Willie Nelson became Willie Nelson, he was just a kid from Abbott, Texas, writing songs in the back of honky-tonks and dreaming of Nashville. And there was one man who gave him his first real shot at the big time, Ray Price. In 1961, Ray was already a star, a smooth-voiced crooner with hits on the radio and respect across the industry. When he heard Willie's songs, he didn't just like them, he loved them. He recorded Willie's tunes, invited him to join his touring band, the Cherokee Cowboys, and gave him a place to sleep when he had nowhere to go. For a struggling songwriter, Ray Price wasn't just a mentor, he was a lifeline. But success has a way of changing people. As Willie's songwriting reputation grew, as artists started cutting his songs and putting his name in the credits, Ray began to feel threatened. Willie wasn't supposed to outshine him. He was supposed to stay in the background, write the hits, and let Ray take the glory. When Willie started talking about a solo career, about doing things his own way, Ray didn't take it well. The split was ugly. Ray accused Willie of being ungrateful, of biting the hand that fed him. He told people in Nashville that Willie was difficult to work with, that he was unreliable. In an industry built on reputation, those words had power. Doors that should have opened for Willie stayed closed. Sessions that should have been his went to other writers. Willie never publicly attacked Ray back. That wasn't his style, but decades later, he'd admit the betrayal hurt more than anything in those early years. He'd given Ray some of his best songs, his loyalty, his friendship, and when it mattered most, Ray had chosen ego over everything else. They eventually reconciled before Ray's death in 2013, sharing a stage one last time. But Willie never forgot what it felt like to be thrown aside by someone he'd looked up to like a father. That kind of wound leaves a scar that never fully fades. Number 4, Waylon Jennings. This one's complicated, because if you know anything about Willie Nelson, you know about his friendship with Waylon Jennings. They were the original outlaws, the rebels who told Nashville's establishment to go to hell and made country music dangerous again. They recorded together, toured together, and built a brotherhood that defined an entire era. But brotherhood doesn't mean it's always smooth. In the late 1970s, when the outlaw movement was at its peak, Willie and Waylon were on top of the world. They had the hits, the respect, and the freedom to make music their way. But Waylon was drowning. His cocaine habit had gone from recreational to catastrophic. He was burning through money, missing shows, and alienating everyone around him, and he was dragging Willie's name down with him. The breaking point came during a tour when Waylon showed up so high he could barely stand. Willie had built his reputation on professionalism, on showing up and delivering no matter what. Waylon was making them both look like jokes. After the show, Willie confronted him backstage. The argument was explosive. Voices were raised. Things were said that couldn't be unsaid. For months afterward, they didn't speak. The outlaw movement, the thing they'd built together, was crumbling because Waylon couldn't get clean. Willie watched his friend spiral and felt helpless to stop it. But more than that, he felt angry. Angry that Waylon was throwing away everything they'd worked for. Angry that he had to watch someone he loved destroy himself. Eventually, Waylon got sober. The friendship healed. They made more music together and laughed about the old days. But Willie never forgot how close they came to losing everything. And he never forgot the rage he felt watching Waylon choose drugs over their legacy. Love and hatred aren't opposites. Sometimes they're two sides of the same coin. Number 3, Merle Haggard. When you talk about outlaw country, two names always come up first: Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard. They were both rebels, both poets, both voices of working-class America. On paper, they should have been brothers in arms. But the truth was far more complicated. Merle had already claimed his throne by the time Willie broke through. He was the Okie from Muskogee, the ex-convict, who'd turned his life around and become country music's conscience. When Willie started gaining traction in the early 1970s with his unconventional sound and hippie image, Merle saw him as a threat to everything authentic country music stood for. The tension came to a head during the outlaw country movement. Willie and Waylon were getting all the attention, all the credit for revolutionizing the genre. Merle felt pushed aside, dismissed as old guard, despite being just as rebellious in his own way. He started making comments to the press, subtle digs, about Willie's appearance, his pot smoking, his crossover appeal. He called him a gimmick, said his music wasn't real country. Behind the scenes, it was worse. At industry events, Merle would refuse to share the stage with Willie. When promoters tried to book them together for festivals, Merle would demand top billing or he wouldn't show. He told other artists that Willie was selling out, watering down country music to appeal to rock audiences who didn't really understand what the genre was about. Willie tried to take the high road. He'd praise Merle in interviews, talk about his influence, try to build bridges, but privately, he was furious. He'd spent years fighting for creative freedom, for the right to make music his way. And now another artist was attacking him for the same independence Merle himself had demanded. The rivalry softened in their later years. They recorded together, even toured briefly, but it was always awkward, always forced. Two legends in the same room, both too proud to admit they'd wasted decades on a feud born of jealousy and insecurity. When Merle died in 2016, Willie said all the right things. But those who knew him best saw something else in his eyes. Relief, maybe. Or just the quiet satisfaction of having outlasted his harshest critic. Number 2. Connie Nelson. Marriage number 3 should have been the charm. Connie Kopec seemed different from Willie's previous wives. She understood the music business, accepted his lifestyle, and genuinely seemed to love him for who he was. They married in 1971, had 2 daughters together, and for a while, things were good. But life on the road takes its toll. Willie was gone for months at a time, touring relentlessly to build his career. Connie stayed home with the kids, alone, waiting, and slowly growing resentful. By the late 1970s, when Willie's career finally exploded, the marriage was already dying. The divorce in 1988 turned into a nightmare. Connie didn't just want a settlement, she wanted revenge. She hired aggressive lawyers and went after everything: the houses, the royalties, the publishing rights, even ownership stakes in his master recordings. She claimed she'd been instrumental in his success, that she deserved half of everything he'd built. But it got worse. During the proceedings, Connie started leaking stories to tabloids, private moments, embarrassing details, things Willie had confided in her during their 17 years together. She painted him as a deadbeat father, an absent husband, someone who cared more about fame than family. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. The damage was done. Willie was blindsided. He'd expected a difficult divorce, but not a public character assassination. The stress compounded everything else happening in his life. This was around the same time as his IRS troubles. And suddenly, he was fighting battles on multiple fronts: financial ruin, public humiliation, and the loss of his family all at once. The settlement cost him millions, money he didn't have while dealing with his tax debt. He had to sell assets, liquidate investments, scramble to pay both his ex-wife and the government. And through it all, Connie kept talking to anyone who would listen, ensuring the world knew her version of their story. Today, Willie rarely speaks about Connie. When asked about his marriages, he talks about his current wife, Annie, or makes jokes about his failures as a husband, but he never mentions Connie by name. That silence speaks volumes. Because for Willie, the worst betrayals aren't the ones that come from strangers or business partners. They're the ones that come from the people who shared your bed and knew all your secrets. Number 1, Billy Cooper. This one cuts the deepest, because while the others were about business, about ego, about misunderstandings, this one was about pure betrayal. And it came from someone Willie had trusted like a brother. Billy Cooper wasn't famous. He wasn't a musician or a mogul. He was Willie's accountant and financial manager. Hired back in the 1970s to handle the money so Willie could focus on the music. For years, Billy was part of the inner circle, traveling with the band, sharing meals, becoming family. But behind the scenes, Billy was stealing, systematically, methodically. Over the course of a decade, he embezzled millions from Willie's accounts. He set up fake companies, created fraudulent tax shelters, and siphoned money into his own pockets while Willie trusted him completely. When the IRS came down on Willie in 1990, it wasn't just about bad investments. It was about Billy Cooper's criminal schemes. Billy had set up illegal tax shelters, forged documents, and left Willie holding the bag. And when everything collapsed, and the government seized Willie's assets and demanded their money, Billy disappeared. No apology, no explanation, no attempt to make things right. He just vanished. Willie was devastated. The financial loss was catastrophic, but the emotional wound was worse. Billy had looked him in the eye for years, had eaten at his table, had been trusted with everything, and the whole time he was stealing. It wasn't just about money, it was about the violation of trust, the realization that someone he'd considered family had been lying to him every single day. Billy Cooper eventually faced legal consequences, but the damage was done. Willie spent years rebuilding his finances, his reputation, and his ability to trust people with his business. To this day, he keeps his financial affairs much closer to the vest, relying on a smaller circle of people he's known for decades. When asked about Billy in rare interviews, Willie's voice goes flat. The warmth disappears. There's no forgiveness there, no philosophical acceptance, just cold anger at a man who betrayed him in the worst possible way. Because Willie Nelson can forgive a lot of things, but stealing from him while pretending to be his friend, that's the one thing he'll never forget. So there you have it. 5 names that Willie Nelson has carried with him through 9 decades of life. Ray Price, the mentor who turned on him. Waylon Jennings, the brother who nearly destroyed everything they built. The IRS, the system that tried to break him. Columbia Records, the label that never understood him. And Billy Cooper, the friend who stole his trust and his fortune. Willie's still here, still touring, still making music at 92 years old. He's outlived most of his enemies and outlasted all of his doubters. But these 5 wounds remain reminders that even legends are human, that even the kindest souls have limits to their forgiveness. Because Willie Nelson might preach love and acceptance from every stage, but he's also a man who remembers, and some things, once done, can never truly be undone. What do you think? Did any of these stories surprise you? Did you know about Billy Cooper's betrayal? Or the real reason Willie left Columbia Records? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more untold stories about country music's greatest legends, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because the truth is always more complicated than the legend.